Replace your print servers with a secure cloud solution that scales with you. You'll automate print management, get scalability and flexibility, as well as complete control with visibility into all your print processes. Start a free 30-day trial by going to printerlogic.com/packet pushers.
Hello, I'm Johna Johnson, CEO of Nemertes, and I'm here with my co-host,
John Burke,
who is the CTO of Nemertes. And you are listening to Heavy Strategy, the show that tries to ask the right questions, not give the right answers. On today's top show, we are going to talk about something that is top of mind for a lot of our clients, which is citizen coders. The whole low-code, no-code movement, the movement towards letting business users create their own software and thereby obviating the need of the rest of us to have application development teams, or at least have those teams focused on something else. That's kind of the strategic thing that we're looking at. John, I know you are a big fan of citizen coders and you think it's a great idea. Why is that?
I've always been a fan of it, actually, going all the way back to, this will date me, HyperCard. But yeah, I think putting good tools in the hands of people who know what they want to accomplish, and they're the subject matter experts in their subject, be it an academic discipline or a business line, giving them the tools they need to automate the tasks they do is a win-win for the business. It is a win because it gets their work done more efficiently. And it's also a win because it means you're not tying up developer resources, helping them get their work done more efficiently. So yeah, big fan.
Oh, well, let me ask you something. You are, in my head, using automation and coding interchangeably. In other words, in your view, coding is just a good way to automate things. Is there more to it than that, though?
Oh, sure. There's plenty of other ways you can be automating stuff aside from hardline coding. And anybody who's done any kind of work with an iPaaS platform, something like Zapier or Boomi, they're doing development work. And even though it only involves a few mouse clicks and maybe an if-then statement, it's still citizen coding because it's getting the work of integrating things previously unintegrated, getting them together, and getting out of that combination something that you would previously have had to involve the IT department and developers to get done.
Well, and let me clarify, iPaaS is integration of platform as a service?
No, just integration platform as a service.
Integration platform as a service. And some of the apps you talked about that do that, I know we're familiar with Zapier. Boomi is another one. Is that one you were mentioning?
Yep, indeed. And there are plenty of others out there, probably a score at least. I think our old friend Zoho does that too. They seem to have one of everything. And then, of course, there's this new generation of tools, things getting called robotic process
automation
tools,
RPA,
stuff like Blue Prism, stuff like Work Fusion or Appian, which also plays in the old traditional low-code space. They're all out there saying, look, you don't even have to, as the citizen developer, put your hands on the keyboard and tell me what to do. Just let me watch what you're doing and look at the systems behind what you're doing, and I'll figure out the automation, and then you can just use me. So I think that especially is going to be a game changer for enterprises of many sorts and all sizes.
I'm going to push back on this. What a surprise. Because I don't know. Part of this is I'm an old fart and I went through years of training, but I've also noticed experientially that when you're working with citizen coders, they make the stupidest mistakes, and they're mistakes that have long, long lives. So you and I both know at a previous organization, there was somebody who was an incredibly hard worker, incredibly talented, but had a solution to resolving a workflow issue within a database that was horrific. And there was no way to unroll this thing, because essentially what she did was she created lots and lots and lots of statuses that you had to select one, reflecting not just the thing, but where each thing was in the status. So you had drop-down menus that were like 50 lines long that you had to select as something moved through the workflow. And
the combinatoric explosion. Yep.
Exactly. And another thing that really bothers me is when folks are cutting and pasting content instead of including a link to the content, not understanding that they're creating duplicate versions of the content which will then conflict with each other because somebody will change one of them, and then you have no idea which one's the canonical, and everything grinds to a halt. And those kinds of mistakes are common and obvious with citizen coders because nobody taught them to program.
Good point, and a valid one, and a significant cause of concern, not just for the problems you cite, but for other problems that citizen coders can have because they're not trained to think the way a coder thinks, sequentially, logically, and within specific constraints. But I will simply point out two things. One, even trained coders make mistakes like that all the time.
Sure, but much
and
less.
It's one of the reasons we have like passwords that are programmed into the code.
Yeah, right. Oh, you forgot. Hang on. We got to stop here because another one of my big top 3 mistakes that people make is hardwire things that ought to be variables. Remember the Y2K issues? A lot of them. During Y2K, we discovered that people had hard-coded IP addresses into things. And those were, yes, I take your point, they were professional coders. So yes, that is an issue, even with professional coders. But here's the thing. Most of us got trained and beaten on the head enough times that we recognize that as a mistake. I can argue till I'm blue in the face with a citizen coder, like, but I want to do it this way. It's easier for me. It's better. I want the cut and paste. I want to hardwire this. And I don't want to listen to your explanation for why that's a bad idea. So you're sort of stuck. With an actual professional, they get it. They go, ooh, this is a violation of one of the great rules of, coding. I'm not going to do it. I got caught doing it. Oopsie. So
with the exception of some egregious security problems, you must work with different coders than I've worked with over the years, because they'll go toe to toe and fist to fist about whose way of solving the problem is better in the specific circumstances. However, I will also point out that current low-code, no-code frameworks that are meant for enterprise usage do provide the ability to build in guardrails for your citizen coders so you can help them avoid some of the worst things, like you can provide them with authoritative sources of data. So they're not, looking at that static file on their desktop for the list of people who work at the company. They're looking at the company directory. Things like that can be built into the framework. So it's right there for them when they want to use it. And you can build guardrails like it won't let them point at something that's stored on their local machine. It will only let them use things that are up in a network file store somewhere. It's not possible to do the ultimate and actually protect people from doing something stupid. There is no technology on Earth yet that can do that for us. And of course, AI, on the one hand, is going to help, and on the other hand, is going to accelerate the process of doing stupid things. So, we'll see how that shakes out, which way the balance tips on that one. But things that you can do with these systems to help the citizen developers, and maybe developers is a better word than coders, because if you're not writing code, you can still be developing. Protect them from putting infinite loops in place, or from disclosing PII in the output stream of something. Stuff like that can be built into the tools and is increasingly built into the tools. And at the same time, for folks who don't have the logical bent, you can even provide scaffolding in the form of, these low-code, no-code tools that are built around the concept of flowcharting. It kind of forces you into the, well, here's the output. Now, what do I do with it? Well, here's the condition under which I want to do X or Y. And it forces the structure on you to some extent. And that is a huge boon to folks. It actually helps teach them how to think this way. And that's something that there's just not enough coders to do. You can sit down next to somebody and teach them how to do this, but there's not enough people to do that for a large enterprise. And so I'm still there that it's not perfect and it's not flawless, but it's a huge boon to a large enterprise to get them developing across the organization and not with IT as a choke point.
So I'm going to come back to that, but I first absolutely positively am encouraging every listener who is interested in this problem to run, do not walk, and listen to the wonderful, amazing, outstanding, awesome YouTube called The Problem with Time and Time Zones. Computer File is the programmer who does it. The long story is this is why you should leave it to the professionals, but it's funny as hell how he gets there. Again, it's The Problem with Time and Time Zones. Go listen to it. It is It's 10 years old, but still as funny as it's ever been. I think it's around 20 minutes, but it's worth every single listen. Yeah. So
I heartily concur. That is one of the funniest things I have ever sat through. It is a gorgeous piece of powerful justification for providing a framework that gives people the ability to just pull up a proper date function instead of having to develop one themselves from scratch.
Exactly. And when you were talking about frameworks and, things like pointing to authoritative data sources, that triggered that memory. And I just had to start smiling when you were talking about that. But, aside from the fact that I've got this somewhat elitist mentality that the amateurs can't do it as well as the professionals, I will also say, I understand what you're saying in kind of the perfect world in which everything works smoothly, all processes, run well, all battle plans successfully defeat the enemy, blah, blah, blah. In the real world, what you run up against a lot is people who are perfectly capable of doing everything intelligently, telling you with a straight face that they can't, because that's like geek stuff and they're not geeks. They're lawyers or artists or whatever the hell. And what I found, by the way, if you're a lawyer or an artist listening to this getting mad at, please don't, because many of my lawyer and artist friends are much more logical thinkers than many of my computer friends. So what makes me mad is you have a user that finds this as part of their job and doesn't want to do it. Kind of like the old days when you remember we had guys with secretaries. Usually it was guys, and usually the secretaries were women. And you would say, no, you have to type your own letter. We have this thing called a word processor. So if you make mistakes, you can correct them. And they got mad. They were like, you are adding work to my day. This is not helpful. Why are you doing this? And then they stage a work slowdown. And then we had to wait till they all retired. And then their secretaries took their jobs, which actually has happened a lot because secretaries tend to know quite a lot more than they're given credit for. But in any event, the problem you run into is if you take coding and make it part of somebody's job, you're going to, no matter how you dress it up, no matter how you try to put sugar sauce on it, they're still going to push back and say, this is work I didn't have to do. And now you're telling me I had to do this. I want to just be able to call my IT concierge service and have them do it for me. And okay, if they're senior executive, you might cut them some slack, but you can't have the rank and file saying, no, I don't want to do this. And that's kind of where we are right now.
Well, yes and no. In a lot of organizations, this winds up being a pull, not a push from the business lines, because yes, they can call IT and say, I'd like this developed for me so I can do my work faster. And IT can say, sure, you're number 47 in the queue. And at the current rate of development, we'll be getting to the initial specs development phase of your development project in 17 months. So we'll call you back in 16 months so we can get it on your calendar.
First of all, if you're IT, that is a great reason to have a very, very long pipeline for something like that. But actually, as the user, this is kind of a win-win because I called IT. IT said they couldn't get to it. I don't have to do it now. It's not my fault.
I don't get my work done fast. I don't get done the thing I want to do. I want to get my work done, and I can't because
you
I
are imputing
to get it done in 2 hours instead of 8 hours. My job currently sucks because I'm doing this all manually.
You are imputing a purity of motivation to employees that I think does not apply. And in fairness, you are imputing a pureness of motivation to employers, which does not apply, because anyone that's been working for more than about 12 minutes has figured out, okay, it takes me 8 hours to get this thing done, which I could shrink down to 2, so my boss could stuff my day with another 6 hours. Where's the win in that for me?
If I get bonused on how much stuff I complete in the course of a year, and I can complete 4 times as much stuff if I have this script or this code piece or this application on my desktop, I want that application on my desktop. That doesn't butter any bread in IT. They don't care about my bonus. They've got a development queue and I'm number 47 in it. I don't see how the incentive isn't there for me to want to get the ability to develop this application for myself. And in fact, people do. They embark on rogue development efforts and they go out and they use Zapier or Boomi or something on their own credit card to get this stuff done. And then you've got rogue development projects out there that aren't under any kind of IT control, no enterprise sanction, no concern for data privacy or anything like that. So you don't want that. That's bad.
So basically, if I can restate what you've said, you are assuming that people actually want to do their jobs better, and you're assuming that employers will not then simply say, "Oh, look, you're working faster. Let me give you more stuff to do." And your argument then, based on those two things, is this will help having a formal citizen coder program will help tamp down on shadow IT, assuming these two things that I can't really take as assumptions, which is that people want to get their jobs done faster because their employers will not then stuff up all available time with more stuff.
Their time is already stuffed up with all available stuff.
Exactly. But it's stuff
And
they know how to do.
They've got a backlog that they're never getting to. And that backlog is a yoke on their back and a lash with which their supervisors can lash them. Like, you are miserably underperforming. And of course, you're not getting any kind of bonus this year. Look at the backlog of work you never get to.
Well, I'm not going to argue with your bonuses.
Workplace game, but honestly, I think when you look out there in the world, you see that folks do want to try and get stuff done better because they want to do something different than the 8-hour slog through this stuff that they know a 15-line script could handle for them in a quarter of the time, but they don't have the wherewithal to write that thing.
Well, I think you're assuming much more of a perfect world. And for longtime listeners, I am actually channeling my inner Greg Farrow because he has always taken a very jaundiced view of the fact that if you're working in a large organization, you're participating in capitalism and you're the patsy, because the whole point of capitalism is to take your work, pay you less than it's worth, and pocket the difference, which is the definition of capitalism. Not that he is anti-capitalist, but he just wants to make sure everybody knows this. And my point is, very often when in large organizations, you'll find somebody in one of those lines of business that doesn't involve coding or IT saying, you know what? No, I know this is how the game is played. It's their responsibility, meaning the bosses, the rest of the system, to give me the tools I need. I can only go as far as I can go with the tools I need. Now you're telling me I need to learn a whole new tool so I can do my job faster. This is what unions protect you against.
Streamline your IT infrastructure by switching to a cloud-native print solution. You'll reduce infrastructure by eliminating print servers, get front-end and back-end print management. You'll be bridging the gap between automation, document management, and print. You'll secure your data end-to-end with native integrations and enjoy a zero-trust-enabled environment. Start a free 30-day trial by going to printerlogic.com/packetpushers. It also integrates easily with EMR and ERP solutions. Plus, a simplified scanning solution is included. You can automate capabilities, create no-code forms and workflows in the same admin account, have full visibility, and reduce print tickets by 90%. Start that free 30-day trial by going to printerlogic.com/packetpushers.
But
because it's rightfully viewed as exploitation.
Unions didn't protect, accountants from the need to use spreadsheets. It just became something had to do in order to deal with the kinds and volumes and speeds of data change that they had to deal with.
Well, to my understanding, accountants aren't unionized because they're considered professionals, and that's the twist on all of this. Because
interesting point. Yeah, and most of the folks that we're pointing this at are also not unionized.
but they're starting to clue in on why many people have decided they will become unionized, because the people that became unionized did so for this exact reason. It's like,
I think that they should be unionized, but I don't think any union in any space like this is going to succeed well in attracting people to it or retaining people in it or negotiating successfully with enterprises if they're fundamentally opposed to people taking on this kind of work, like using new tools and helping build new tools to do their work.
You haven't been hanging around a lot of union people and a lot of unions, I can tell you that.
It's been a few years.
Yeah, a lot of my friends are actually union folk, and they would point out that, yes, this is the bait and switch that is often used. Aha, you're doing lighting. We've brought in this whole new tool. You need to learn how to do the lighting on your own time because that's training, that's not paid time. And then when you're good at it, we can start paying you again. So now I get a whole lot of unpaid work now. So with all due respect, I know some people listening to this are probably boiling at the mention of unions, and my apologies, but they do exist for legitimate reasons. Coming all the way back to this, a bigger question I think where we can agree is potentially that if you do decide to embark upon the idea of having citizen coders with all the concerns that we've mentioned, How would you do it in such a way that people will A, find it easy and comfortable as much as possible to learn, and B, will adapt a lot of the best practices, understood that you can enforce that by the tools you use, but there's got to be some point of, hey, I need to think logically and do things the right way, which means I need to understand logic and the right way. How would you put that in place organizationally in a large organization?
Well, if I was an ethical employer with a principled
Which you are.
self-interest kind of perspective on things, a rising tide lifts all boats, I would compensate people extra for doing this kind of development work because it shouldn't be within the scope of the salary that was specified with them doing all this work manually. They should get a bump up for helping develop the tools that make it a different job. And I would probably start with a smaller circle of potential citizen developers in any given company, in any given organization. I came out of universities. There are the departmental power users and super users, the folks who went rogue to solve a problem that they had that they couldn't get the larger organization's IT department to pay attention to. A, compensate them, and B, start with the folks who already shown some motivation and shown some skill in using IT generally in unorthodox ways for the company to solve the problems that they have, and or have shown themselves to be technology leaders within their departments, those super users that other people in the department go to for help because they're the ones who understand stuff. Start there and work outwards from there. I'm all about this has got to be a pull, not a push. If you push this on folks, it's going to be exactly like you're describing. If you shove this tool on somebody and say, here, automate your job, they're going to say, I'm busy doing my job.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, for the record, you are a very ethical employer, and I very much appreciate that. And you have contributed over the years many highly ethical and good things to our workplace. So thank you for that, John. And I really mean that. Of course, I'm thinking about downtime at the top, but there are many other good things. All that said, we're talking about automation. You kind of keep circling back to this notion of being able to automate mundane tasks and use these tools to automate mundane tasks. I know Gartner, Boo Hiss, likes to talk a whole lot about hyper automation. What is that? And is it a good thing, a bad thing? How does this fit in with the whole citizen coder universe?
I guess you could pay Gartner like $100,000 to hear this, or you can hear it from me. It is automating with a plan, like having a plan to automate as much as you can. That's the mystery of it right there. Having a plan, coordinating your work, automating as much as you can. And that means using whatever tools you can bring to bear. Everything from the traditional low code stuff to the newer RPA and even
AI,
LLM based, AI based, hope it's not hallucinating based.
Yeah,
prop of current functionality.
Well, and in fact, there's like a whole laundry list of wonderful acronyms from AI to ML, machine learning, event-driven software architecture, as we mentioned, robotic process automation, RPA, business process management, BPM, intelligent business process management, IBPM, integration as a service, we mentioned them, integration platform as a service, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It all boils down to there's a bunch of tools, figuring out which ones are good for what you're trying to do, which is having that plan. And I know there was an example you were wanting to bring up about one of our clients. I can't remember, was it a client or someone you used to work with?
It was a client. Yeah, gosh, it must have been 10 years ago.
Oh, now? Yes. I remember them. Anyway, tell the story because that's a good almost.
One. Anyway, they were, they're a reasonable counterexample or illustration of the dangers of doing it poorly, because they turned out to have poorly managed the enterprise overall, the enterprise of citizen coding, because they got Lotus Notes in. It was, it was in some ways like the grandfather of citizen coding, because the whole point was it was easy enough to build your own database and programs around that database in Notes that anybody who wanted one could build one and use it. It was like having, Access before Access existed, of course. And Microsoft Access, that is. Sorry, folks. And so at this company, which was, a large enterprise, thousands and thousands and thousands of employees, they wound up with more than 10,000 separate Lotus Notes databases with associated programs. And when the time came to throw notes over for something else, they basically had to go through that whole backlog and figure out if it was still something anybody cared about, who cared about it, what it was supposed to do, and whether it was still something that needed doing before they could decide that it needed to be migrated to the new platform or, decommissioned and left in the dust heap. And it slowed their migration off of Notes down by 18 months, 2 years to have to go through that backlog because they hadn't enforced any kind of coding standards for documentation, for tracking ownership. And the newer platforms make it easier to do some of that stuff. Like you can't even start using it until you explain what it is you're trying to do. And accounts are associated with things in an active, ongoing sense. So it's easier to track ownership and usage. But still, it is a good cautionary tale. Thank you for the reminder.
Yeah. And I think you pointed out when we were talking about this, that basically the simple words for this are technical debt. And I would argue that technical debt kind of cuts both ways, because if you do citizen coding well, you will actually minimize the technical debt because all the information will be stored in all the appropriate packages and frameworks so that you don't have to go back and reinvent the wheel. And I think about some of the tools that we use that are effectively citizen coders, and, top of the list is Alchemer. Some of us love it. Some of us hate it. I'm on the love side because you can do anything with Alchemer. But the great thing about Alchemer is it's got a record of everything that was done. So if you want to set up an Alchemer for a similar project, you just have to copy the previous project. So you're not reinventing the wheel, which is helpful, I think.
Yeah. And, we use Notion. Notion's another one of those tools that's great for this kind of citizen coding context.
Well,
maybe a little weak on the guardrails, but they're getting there.
Well, and I would also just raise another point, because we were talking about how do you actually make this happen if you decide you want to make it happen. And one of the things you said was start with a core group of motivated users and expand from there. And the other thing you said was make sure that they are rewarded for it as opposed to punished for it, which makes good sense. I would also say recognize that not every citizen coder is going to like every tool, and be accepting of an environment where there's multiple tools. I'm thinking about particular individuals in our organization who hate one of the tools and love the other one. It is what it is, right? People's minds are different. They look at, some people are very graphically oriented. And if the design is ugly and the colors are bad, I know it sounds trite, but truthfully, if you have to stare at a screen all day and the colors are like fingers on a chalkboard to you, and you're one of those people for whom colors matters, it's a thing. And you know what? That person may be perfectly happy with an entirely different package that does many of the same things. Don't try to dictate beyond a certain sort of broad sense of this. These are the supported packages. Pick one that makes sense. The other thing I would do in such an environment is have a mentor-mentee relationship so people know who to call. And as much as possible, I say call, that's old-fashioned, who to text, who to reach out to. And as much as possible, make the support people not IT. So IT's role and application development's role in all of this is to help select the packages, maybe train up the power users, and then put in place that mentor program so they know who to reach out to, and it's not you. Because we haven't really talked about this, but the big question is, if everybody's a coder, then what are the coders doing? Well, they're working on the stuff that's a lot harder, that is big data analysis, coming up with insights that you couldn't have possibly come up with any other way, using tools, pushing them to their limits, and doing harder programming. The thing I would watch out for.
Also, I'm going to interrupt you and say they're also doing the coding that's facing outside people. It's facing your customers, your end users, your partners. That's not stuff you're leaving to the amateurs.
That is an excellent point.
All of the coding inside the IT envelope, stuff that's in support of IT operations or cybersecurity in your organization. Again, that's not stuff you're leaving to the amateurs.
That's an excellent point, that there's some stuff. Basically, what you're saying is amateurs can automate their own processes. But here's a problem. If I'm marketing, my own process is going to be having an outside focus. So there's going to be a blurry line there. You can't, are you saying marketing people can never be citizen coders? That would be nuts.
It's going to depend on what it is they're trying to get automated. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so that's something to think about, which is a great point. And I hadn't actually thought about that. So thanks. I would also raise the caution, though, and this is a point that I make. People say, "What's AI good for?" And my biology is my biology is a little bit weak, but essentially there are like fish that will go and eat all the dead gunk, the waste. These are the ones that'll come in on bigger animals, and they have birds that'll do this on mammals that will come and eat all the bugs, eat all the crap so that the bigger organism is living free from waste and gunk. The analog of waste and gunk is there's an awful lot of mediocre programming that gets done across the organization. And you may discover as an application person that your team has a bunch of mediocre programmers in it that are little more than citizen coders with a job title. And those people may actually need to be either escorted to lines of business or escorted right on out the business, because as your developers become more of the high performance team, the racehorses, if you've got somebody who's just not able to keep up, they either need to become a citizen coder and show value to the business, or need to perhaps find a different organization that isn't quite so mature. And that's going to be something to be aware of, because that's what AI really uncovers.
Yeah, I think that's a place where the idea of super users or power users comes in handy again. They migrate out of IT and into that kind of a role outside IT.
No. Hang on. A power user is not somebody who's a mediocre IT professional and a non-SME. A power user is an SME who is also pretty damn good with some IT stuff. So that's the problem. And by the way, I realized I never tied the loop back to AI, but what AI does is it automates all the crap that is literally crap, boring, rote, manual, and you don't need people to do that. But when you do that, you suddenly discover that you were employing a fairly substantial cadre of people whose job it was to generate mediocre content or generate mediocre code or generate mediocre pictures, because that was good enough for what you were trying to do. The first place that AI hit was in developing financial financial announcements for companies, because essentially the structure is exactly the same every single time. And the information that's in it is the same every single time. And there's only so many ways you can say revenues this quarter were up 72%. The wording is the same every single time. And they used to have to pay people hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to do this because it was highly technical. AI just came in and started generating those right away. So long story short, you may discover as you're going through this process that you have programmers on board who probably shouldn't be programmers and may not need to be there at all.
Yeah, I think the fact that one of the breakthrough functionalities for Copilot as a developer's aid was the ability to identify like when people had inserted into their own code one of the OWASP top 10 vulnerabilities in a web application, and to put forward the fix for it. Like, okay, you didn't check the bounds on this array here, but you're accessing it there. So you need to stick this code in the middle to, do the boundaries check for you. Or you accepted that input without doing any kind of checking on it to make sure that it wasn't, the start of a SQL injection attack. So you need to check your inputs, and here's the code to do that. The fact that those are two of the most that class of things is one of the breakthrough functionalities for it, just tells you how many times people stick those kinds of problems into their code, why they're still, after, 15 years, in the top 10 for the OWASP. I mean, these things have been there forever. It's because people keep doing it over and over again. And maybe for some of them, it's because coding is really not their strong suit.
Well,
I don't want to paint paint with too wide a brush on this, but yes, for some folks, it's coding maybe isn't their calling.
Well, and I would just want to wrap this up because I know we're pretty much out of time, but we've all seen the memes, and those of us who are old enough get the joke that AI is just clippy. And as you were giving me that example, I'm like, you are inserting a vulnerability. Did you really want to do that?
Yep. Yeah, AI Clippy is much on my mind lately because, honest to God, it's there.
Yes. Yeah, it really is. Well, with that, I think that is kind of a wrap. Thank you for joining us today. Again, if you got feedback or follow-up, particularly if you've had good or bad experiences with citizen coders, please go ahead and send us a message at packetpushers.net/FU for follow-up. You do not need to leave your name or any other identifying details in order to protect the innocent or guilty. Just let us know what you experienced, and we'd love to hear from you. Also, at the packetpushers.net site, you'll find all sorts of cool things like the Network Break podcast, which helps you stay current on the latest tech news, including but well beyond networking, also includes chips, also includes cloud, also includes some software and AI and what it means. Very relevant as you're thinking about all these things going forward. And there's a whole lot more, so do explore. If you want to talk to me or to John, you can reach us at nemerties.com. That's N like Nancy, E-M like Mary, E-R-T like Thomas, E-S, nemerties.com. And we look forward to hearing from you.